Welcome to the Royal Caribbean Blog Podcast, where we can look into the world of Royal Caribbean cruising. I'm your host, Matt Hochberg, and this is episode number 560. I'm doing something very different this year when I go to Europe. It's not my first time in Europe, but I'm planning it differently, and I wanted to share with you my insight and tips for how to plan a European cruise vacation and the shore excursions that come with it. Here we go. I'm headed to Europe on a Royal Caribbean Blog group cruise out of Southampton, England, going on an 8-night Northern European cruise. I am so excited for this cruise. It's a group cruise. I'm going with my friends. My family's joining me for it, and it'll be their first time in Europe, and it's an itinerary I haven't done before. So it's like every checkbox I think a lot of people look for in a cruise as to why they would book one. And for this one, I'm really excited for it. But when I was planning this cruise, I realized almost early on I was about to make a big mistake with how I was planning it, because I think I was really planning this cruise the same way I plan my Caribbean cruises. And it occurred to me that maybe I shouldn't be doing it. So what I mean by this is, we're going to ports like Rotterdam, Oslo, Copenhagen, and Hamburg. And we're actually staying on for the next sailing, which is going to be a 7-night Norwegian fjord sailing, because we're already there and it's a totally different itinerary. But when I was planning this cruise, I was doing it kind of the same way I used to do it in the past, where, I would start booking Royal Caribbean excursions. And it was kind of interesting because for a while there were no excursions, then there were like 2, and then Royal added some more, but they sold out very quickly. And I really fell into the trap of just relying on the Royal Caribbean tours as the options to book. And it occurred to me as I was going for the umpteenth time to see if anything had unsold out for these tours, as maybe I shouldn't be doing it this way. Because when you're in Europe, especially when you're going to some of these major cities, there's a lot to do within the city. You really don't need a tour. The Caribbean is different because the Caribbean, oftentimes you're going to certainly these different countries, but it's a lot more rural. I mean, there's not so many cities as there are when we're talking about places like Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark, Oslo, the capital of Norway. I mean, they're not, it's not New York City or London, but these are still big cities. There's still lots going on there. And if you then take the next step, which is what I did, to start Googling, hey, what should I do in these places? Because this is my approach to any cruise port I go to. The first thing I do is I Google what are the things to do in blank or best things to do in blank. And it usually gives me a starting point. Now, Royal Caribbean excursions are also a really good starting point as well. So I'm not here to tell you guys you should never use Royal Caribbean excursions. Rather, I take both as, things I can do on my own, things I can do with the Royal Caribbean, and kind of find that right balance for me. And ultimately, the more I looked at it, I realized that pretty much all the cool, fun, interesting things to do in all these places that I'm going to on this cruise are all within the city. So I started thinking, well, first of all, the tours that Royal are offering are pretty much sold out. But more importantly, they're very expensive. This is the truth, by the way, of all European itineraries, is the excursions are going to cost a lot. It's true of Alaska as well, but whereas the Caribbean, you can find, I think, cheaper excursions to go on. In Europe, it's not so much the case. So I'm looking at a lot of very few options left. The ones that are there are expensive. And it really got me thinking, there's got to be a better way about it. And really what I did is I canceled all my Royal Caribbean excursions and instead decided to go on my own. And that might sound scary, but you have to remember the reality. I think of cruising in Europe. And as an American, it's easy to forget that. But I thought about it as I went to Europe the last 2 years on different cruises, granted different places. But the truth is, you can easily get around. You don't need to have organized tours in the same way that you do in other countries. And that's in the Caribbean, that is. And that's because the things to do are easily accessible. Number one, you're within the city. So it's easy to, you're not going far. You're not going an hour and a half. Certainly if I was, then I would go through Royal Caribbean. As an example, last summer, when I went to Bordeaux, France, and Paris, France, those excursions required multi-hour bus rides. And I was not comfortable doing that on my own. I actually thought about it for a hot minute when I was going to Paris if I took the train, the high-speed train, instead of going through a Royal tour. But I was just not willing to risk, putting myself in jeopardy that way. So I went with Royal Caribbean. But when you're talking about, these cool things to do in and around the cities you're visiting, that's number one. Number two, there's also really good transportation options around. And that's not to be missed out on because, you've got very good public transportation, whether it's their subway system or even above ground trains. I think here in the US we would call them like not trolley cars, but above ground. They're not like railroads, like in the, choo-choo sense. They're city trams, streetcars. Anyway, so it's really easy to get around, and it's cheap also. It's pretty simple. You just take your credit card, tap it when you go in, tap it when you go out. If it's kind of similar to Washington, D.C., in that where you start and where you end determines your fare in terms of their metro system. But, this just seems like, again, a simple approach. But number 3, and this is really the most important thing, is it allows me to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I'm visiting places that I've never been before. I don't know what I'm interested in. Now, in each city, I came up with like 3 or 4 cool things that stood out to me on a Google search. But I know me, and me is I'll be walking around, mind my own business, and all of a sudden I'm going to see something. Maybe I'm going to want to spend time in one of these places that I've outlined, a lot of time. Maybe I'm going to walk by and not know it and then realize, oh, there's something really cool right around the corner. Let's go over there, right? Maybe it's a cool bar. Maybe it is a historical site. It could be a show. It could be, I don't know what. But doing this on my own allows me that flexibility, because one of the biggest things I hate about group tours that I've done is you go at the group's pace. And inevitably, when I've done group tours, whether it's Royal Caribbean or even independent tours, is that we spend too much time at places I don't care about and not enough time at other places. As an example, let's say you're doing a tour and they bring you to a great bar or restaurant, right? And it's got I remember I was in Norway last year, different ports that we're going to, and we were in this amazing restaurant that overlooked a fjord and there was a waterfall. I could have spent all day there, but we had 30 minutes. We'd be back on that bus. So that's the flexibility, the freedom that provides is phenomenal. And that's really the reason why I decided to go on my own. Now, it requires a little bit more work. Number 1, I have to come up with a plan. As I mentioned, I have a spreadsheet, came up with, okay, in this port, we're going to go to, this place, and this place. And basically that's my outline. That is not the military report that, I'm going to go from this place. I'm not going from, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And you know what I mean? I'm not outlining like that. These are just loose guidelines so that I have something to do when I'm done with one, move on to the other. But the idea is have that ability to stop and smell the roses, or spend more time in one place, or, veer off and find something else cool because someone mentions it. Maybe there's a tourist that's with me in this one place and, hey, have you guys seen this place? It's really cool. Or I'm talking to somebody who works there, or a local in a restaurant, and they mention something really cool to do. I don't know, but I love that idea of having that flexibility, that much choice in what I do. But it also requires, there's a little more management of time required, right? There's logistics involved with it. First and foremost, I know some of you have already been thinking for a while now, okay, Matt, if you're doing it on your own, you need to make sure you're not left behind. Absolutely. And, managing any tour on your own requires time management. So what that really means to me is you kind of think worst case scenario. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, where's the furthest point I'm willing to go? And then figure out from that point, how much time do I need to get back to the ship? And then double that time. And that's the time you need, basically, to start heading back. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm going to the Opera House in Oslo, which is on my list, but I have no idea if it's actually the furthest away. But if the Oslo Opera House, is 45 minutes away from the cruise port by taxi or whatever, then I would say at the minimum, I would need to leave there an hour and a half before, or hour and 15 minutes, whatever it is, where that math works out to, before I need to leave to go back, right? I mean, give yourself plenty of time. Always plan to get back way earlier than you need to. Because at that point, quite frankly, if you get back to the cruise port, you're so close you can see the ship and you're right around the corner. Usually there's there's more shops, there's whatever. You can always hang out and, spend a little more time there. But the name of the game, in my opinion, is just building in way more time than you think you need. And reasonably, that should work. I mean, listen, there are no guarantees out there. There are risks. I admit that, but I feel like the risks are not crazy. I'm not, as the example I used before, I'm not going, 2 hours away from the cruise port via public transportation something could break down. I mean, trains stop working, buses, traffic, right? 2 hours, an hour, that's still too much. I would never go more than, 45 minutes or so away from the cruise port by public transportation. Also keeping in mind that, it goes fall back on a taxi or an Uber ride because we are in Europe and this is pretty easy to get to. And we're in a city after all, right? So there's a difference, by the way, between, again, doing things in Hamburg versus, taking a long distance trip. And I don't think I would ever do that. So, this all comes with a caveat that you need to look at every port specifically. Luckily, in our case, we're docked, fairly close enough that this is pretty easy to do. And I feel like this is it's a good exercise for anybody who's planning a cruise to look at the tours that are available and figure out which ones work the best for going through Royal Caribbean. And by the way, again, I'm not here to tell you guys you should use Royal Caribbean for your shore excursions. Some people, number one, are very much more comfortable with that. Number two, if you have mobility issues, going through a Royal tour is actually really advantageous because, especially in Europe where there are no ADA rules, it's very hard to get around otherwise on the streets, and, good luck finding a bus or a taxi that can accommodate you. So certainly, if you have mobility issues, I think going through Royal Caribbean has a lot of value to it. Also, sometimes going through Royal Caribbean just makes the process a lot simpler, especially if you're going to, I wouldn't say complex places, but places with admission, or there could be lines involved. It just takes some of the guesswork out of it. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When I book any cruise anywhere in the world, I never say I will only use Royal Caribbean or I will only use third parties, right? I'll never preclude myself from one or the other. But what I will say is I think it's really important to weigh both, but it's also equally important to not fall into the trap of simply, just going only with the cruise line. It's so easy to do that because the excursions that Royal Caribbean offers are so ubiquitous. It's so easy. The Royal Caribbean app, boom, pop it up. It's right there. 3 clicks, you've got a tour booked. Not that it isn't easy to book tours through, Viator.com or shoreexcursionsgroup.com, because it is. But it's just, but Royal Caribbean is already baked in there. You can use your onboard credit. It's just a simpler step involved. But ultimately, this has been a really, I don't say eye-opening, but a good reminder for myself on what I should be doing and things I could be doing better with that. So there you have a thing I've changed in my cruising. And listen, when I come back and we do the review of this, I'll be able to share with all of you if this was a terrible mistake or not. But I really do believe, I think that we've got a pretty good handle on it. And I feel like, going around on my own will give me more options. It probably saves me some money as well and provide me far more flexibility, which quite frankly is something I'm really interested in doing. All right, friends, time for the listener email section of our podcast. This is the part where I read the emails you have sent me. If you want to send me your emails, you always do so by sending to Matt, M-A-T-T, at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Our first email is from Justin. Hey, Matt, with Allure being the first ship to be renovated after the Icon class has debuted, I assume they would put a dueling pianos bar on it. Why do you think they chose not to add such a popular attraction? Boy, Justin, if I had answered this one, I answer a lot of things why Royal Caribbean does or doesn't do certain things. It's really interesting to me why or why not they don't add certain venues. I think in the case of Allure and why they didn't add dueling pianos, a couple things. Number one, Allure is, even though it's the first amplification since 2020, I still believe that they were following the blueprint, if you will, outlined by other Oasis-class ships, primarily Oasis of the Seas and her refurbishment, and some of the features you see on Utopia and Wonder of the Seas. Dueling pianos would have been a concept that doesn't exist on any Oasis-class ships, and it's not to say that it's impossible to do. It's just that I think they maybe saw this a bridge too far, or simply that's an Icon-class feature in the same way you could make, I don't know if this really holds up. I was going to say in the same way that the North Star is a Quantum-class feature. I get it. It's structurally very different and blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, there were a couple of interesting surprises, and we'll have some more about this, I think, on a future episode. Maybe. I know we're definitely writing a blog post about it, about the surprises. Samba Gorilla is still on Allure, which really surprised me. Of course, the fact that, you have certain other venues that were added there. It's just, there are some interesting changes that Royal has and hasn't made to the ship. But anyway, Justin, I hope that answers your question there. It's just one of those, it's just Royal Caribbean being a Royal Caribbean, and yeah, it's a strange one for sure. Next email is from Rebecca. Hey, Matt, my family and I are going on a 7-night cruise on Symphony of the Seas out in New Jersey in June. We're very excited. I had a question about our day in Port Canaveral. A few of us were interested in visiting Kennedy Space Center. Our group includes someone in a wheelchair and a 1.5-year-old. If we don't book it through the cruise and we go on our own, are there any shuttles or would it just be Uber to get there? In your experience, would it be easier to book through the cruise line for this one? Adding, by the way, that our itinerary, we're in port from 1 to 8 p.m. Is this enough time? And does the Space Center remain open after normal hours for cruise passengers? Great questions all around. I'll start with your last questions first. I don't believe they say open for cruise passengers extra. It's just you're there for whenever you're there for. I did a tour through Royal Caribbean to Kennedy Space Center a number of years ago when we visited on, I believe it was Anthem of the Seas. And I loved the tour. It was also very short. We were there, I don't remember our hours, Rebecca, but we were definitely there, like, not the full day. It was one of those, like, similar to you, where we came in late and then spent the afternoon. The good thing is, like, you get there and it's busy, but a lot of people leave by early afternoon, Kennedy Space Center, because they were there in the morning. So, like, it kind of worked itself out. I mean, I was worried about that tour. I thought I was going to go there and be super bored with it, but I, like, regretted that we didn't have more time to go there. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is it's a good idea. But to get there, yeah, you can easily take an Uber or a taxi. The both will be available for you. It's pretty easy to get that. I guess my question is why? I mean, you could book through Royal Caribbean, obviously. The advantage of Royal Caribbean is it makes it easy. The disadvantage is you're on someone else's schedule, and inevitably, and this is true, I think, of every tour Royal Caribbean ever offers. You're always going to be back at the ship way earlier. Like, as an example, if the Royal Caribbean excursion, I'm making up numbers now. If the Royal Caribbean excursion offered you 4 hours at Kennedy Space Center, you could probably do 5 or 6 on your own because, Royal Caribbean is erring on the side of caution. Not to mention the fact that I feel like the tour always takes a little bit more time to get going and then, leaves early. It's like late there, early to go. But a taxi or an Uber is easy to do. I would do Uber, quite frankly. I would probably get the Uber ready in your app, and as you're walking off the gangway, order it or somewhere right around that. So you said, once you know you're not going to be held back too much, I think that would definitely be the case. Next email is from James Flanagan, first time around Royal Caribbean. I'm selling a vision of the seas during hurricane season. I've watched some videos about ships in storms. Do you know why chairs tables aren't bolted down in case of rough seas? Seems like it would be a no-brainer. It's a really good question, actually, why we don't bolt the stuff down. I think part of it is sometimes there's a need to have it moved. Like, we'll just like, hey, we need to move this table from here to here. Or, we want to expand this table. A lot of times some furniture is moved around at night. So as an example, deck chairs. They move them every night. It's kind of crazy, actually. If you ever go up to the pool deck at night, there are crew members who literally pile up all the pool chairs, and somewhere around like 5 or 6 a.m., they bring them all back out there for people to use the next day. So I think part of it is just the flexibility it provides. Is if you have it bolted down, you have no flexibility. Now, in some cases, maybe that makes some sense. In all the cases, by the way, some of those tables are extremely heavy if you try to move them. They're not the same like patio furniture that you find at home. And I think you'll find that obviously they don't move that easily. Now, the lounge chairs, yeah, on the pool deck, as I mentioned, those are stacked up. And forget hurricanes, even when there's high winds, they'll move the chairs around to ensure they don't go flying out there. But I guess the best, after all these years of working, the best thing I can say is, of course, it's not their first rodeo. They understand it. And I feel like they've probably just figured out what works, essentially, given, the logistics and whatnot. Next email is from Matt F. Hey, Matt, my name is also Matt. I'm reaching out from Texas. I've been watching your YouTube channel for a few years and recently started catching up on the podcast. All your content greatly helps in planning and keeping me in the vacation mindset, even when I'm stuck at work. I booked a cruise last year for the Icon on March 8th for myself, our wife, and our daughter. Around December, the 3-year-old decided she didn't want to go, and Grandma and Grandpa decided to take her and some other family for her to go see other family while we were on the cruise. I called Royal Caribbean to let them know. I thought we might be able to remove her from the sailing. When I called customer service, they said we would have to book a whole new room at a significant addition to our original booking costs. The agent then said we could do a port no-show. The question is, what is your experience with port no-shows? Is it a hassle? Do I need to check her in through the app anyway? And finally, can we really expect to get port fees and taxes refunded to her? I read up on your port no-shows in the past, but I wanted to see if you had any more insight on this. And if anything's different in 2025, love what you all are doing over at Royal Caribbean Blog. Matt, great name, and thank you for the email. And the answer is no shows is actually the way to go. I do this all the time with my wife. I'll book a cruise, a year in advance, and I have no idea if she'll actually be able to go. So I put her on there. But I would say I've done this many, many times in which I simply go to the port and they'll ask, okay, Mr. Matt, okay, where is your wife? And I'll say, oh, she's not here. Okay, that's the end of the conversation. Nobody cares. They might make a comment or a little joke, but honestly, nobody cares. And that's the end of it. Don't forget, people can show up differently. Like, as an example, if you were to show up to the cruise terminal at 1:00 and your wife would show up at 2:00 for whatever reason, you'd both be able to board. It's not like they're going to hold you back, like you have to group together or anything like that. So there's that. But it is strange, but no, it's totally fine. And it seems odd because, you want to let them know, but the so-and-so is not showing up there. But it's totally good. The good news is, yes, you'll absolutely get your money back from the port fees and taxes. It just takes like a week or two or something like that, but you'll eventually get a random refund on your credit card bill. But yeah, you absolutely do get it back. Just the port fees and taxes, you get no money back. But obviously, removing your daughter from the reservation would have jacked up your price, and that's the exact reason you shouldn't have done it. So you did exactly what I would have done, and going for the no-show is not a problem. All right, friends, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. Of course, you can always email me your questions, matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com. And always just mention somewhere in there it's for the podcast, because I get a lot of emails, and sometimes I'm not sure it's for the podcast. People asking me for general help. Because for general help, it goes to the message boards. I won't answer it. But here on the podcast, I'm happy to answer it for you all. So, thanks for listening. This has been Matt, and we'll talk again real soon.